its glasses on. Evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you all. Welcome to the RSA. Welcome to the great room. And to all those I know that are watching online as well, welcome, welcome, welcome to this very special event. I've been looking forward to this all day, all week, all year.
Ever since I interviewed you.
Ever since we spoke, Margaret, because it's on a topic that could not be more of the RSA. And we'll get on to what that topic is in the fullness of time. It will become apparent in the fullness of time what that topic is. But our name, full name, Royal Society of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, is a giveaway as to one aspect of what we discussed. I'm going to start by reading out a small section, very small section, took me about 90 minutes, of the book that's catalysing tonight's event. And aim off, so I'm terrible at reading out, so just bear that in mind as we go through. It reads, though, in an age of uncertainty, of polycrisis, of systemic collapse, people who can think like artists are essential. People who can notice, inhabit, understand and communicate complex truths. People who can appreciate that it's at the intersection of ideas and paradoxes that new paths emerge. Curiosity, courage, minds open and alert to alternatives. Bringers together of people, places and ideas. These are the mindsets and capabilities we need everywhere we turn. And those words, slightly paraphrased, are of course yours, Margaret, our guest speaker this evening. Margaret, as you all know, an acclaimed author, entrepreneur, CEO, professor of practice at the University of Bath, and of course a highly respected mentor of leaders right across the world, and author of best-selling books, including, of course, Willful Blindness, Uncharted, and a new book, the topic of this evening's conversation, Embracing Uncertainty, How Writers, Musicians, and Artists Thrive in an Unpredictable World. Here it is. And in that book, for those of you that have delved into it, you will notice featured our other two co-panelists this evening, who we're thrilled to have here for the conversation. To Margaret's immediate left, Andrew Grant is an award-winning landscape architect and member of the faculty of the RDIs. And we're very proud as RSA to be affiliated with the RDIs. Andrew founded his practice, Grant Associates, in 1997, and it's since grown into an internationally renowned design studios. Andrew's design ethos and practice centers on the use of creative ecological design in seeking solutions to the major challenges we all know we face around climate, biodiversity, and more generally the improvement of human health and well-being. And to Andrew's left, Gisette Bushell-Mingo, as you will all know, is an award-winning actor and director whose career has included performances with the Royal Shakespeare Company, the National Theatre, and the Manchester Royal Exchange, an active spokesperson for inclusive arts and politics. Gisette founded Push, a Black-led theatre festival. She was nominated for Olivier Awards for Best Actress in a musical for a role as Rafiki in the West End production of The Lion King.
Sorry.
Right on cue. She hasn't lost it. And she starred in the internationally acclaimed production Nina, a story about me and Nina Simone, about which I hope we'll hear a bit more later on, Gisette. Gisette is currently principal of the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Please join me in welcoming our amazing panel. This is going to be a conversation not just on the stage, but in the whole room. So please prepare some questions, thoughts, reflections for all of the panel, and we'll turn to you in a few moments. But for now, I thought I'd turn first to Margaret and ask Margaret for you to summarize for us, I know this is tricky, the big idea in your beautiful book.
Yeah. Well, I think the book started really with a thought experiment. I live just outside of Bath, and I was standing on the railway platform, and the sound, the announcement comes over saying, the train to London Paddington will arrive in 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I listened to that, and I think, gosh, it just sounds so certain, and it's so precise. And I thought, I don't know why I thought this way. I do think this way. I thought, what if this voice went on to say every single thing that was going to happen to me in the rest of my life, every day, every meal, every train, until the day I died? And I suddenly thought, God, that would be really terrible. So while on the one hand, it was comforting to know that the train was going to arrive, and it probably would be in 2 minutes, the notion of complete certainty suddenly struck me as something that would be absolutely horrible. Not least because it would mean I had no freedom, that I was just boxed into this kind of, I don't know, inevitable matrix of somebody's devising. And so it really got me thinking differently about uncertainty. And while everybody was going around saying, oh my God, uncertainty, uncertainty, I kept thinking, just you wait if you find yourself in a situation where you have none. Then you'll be really keen and enthusiastic about this uncertainty stuff. I think it's time for a reframe. And I thought about all the people I knew who I thought were really great at uncertainty. And those people, by and large, were all artists. I worked in radio, I worked in television, I worked in tech. I worked with lots of designers and writers and musicians and poets. And I thought about them, and then I went out and I talked to a whole bunch more to try to find out what was it that gave them this capacity to deal with uncertainty. And one of them was certainly that they had this phenomenal capacity to just kind of wander around. And some of this started, and I have to be absolutely honest, and this is not flattery, some of this thinking started when a friend of mine said that when you were still at the Bank of England, you often used to just go for walks and kind of try to take the temperature of the mood of people across London. And I thought, well, that's what artists do a lot. Dickens is famous, of course, for his night walks. Virginia Woolf used to walk London all the time, writes about it all the time. And this is a walk without an agenda, it's without a destination. And this seemed to be a real characteristic. And then I talked to Michael Lee, and he talked to me about how when he finished a film, everybody was really keen to move on to the next one. But he always insisted in having a really big gap because he wanted time, apparently, to do nothing. Well, what was he doing? He was wandering around and just grazing, in a way. And he said, it looks like nothing's happening. But he said, this is such a beautiful Michael Lee line, nothing happening is something happening. Mm-hmm. And what he said was, sometimes an idea would pop up, and it might have been an idea I had 20 years ago. Like 20 years ago, I'd been thinking about the abortion law. And suddenly, around 2000, it seemed like now was the moment to make that film. And it was that moment. And I've thought also about the degree to which, lots of the artists I worked with had this uncanny ability to produce work at just the moment that the world wanted that thing. Mm-hmm. But they'd been working on it for 3 years, 5 years, or in Mike Lee's case, actually 50 years, 20 years, sorry. So I thought this wandering without an agenda is really important. And Jed Mercurio talked to me about just horizon scanning every day as a routine, what's going on out there. So I thought that's part of it. It's this ability to pay attention without rules, without an agenda, without priorities, and just to be open to what you see. And then, of course, because artists are also deeply pragmatic, there's a need to start. And so artists are capable of starting without a plan. Now, this really freaks people out, because most people can't leave the front door without knowing exactly how long it's going to take according to Google Maps, and exactly what time the train's coming or the bus is coming, when the plane is leaving, and where I'm staying, and what TripAdvisor said about every single place I'm going to visit. But there are artists like Lee Childs and Murakami who start novels with just an idea. They don't have a plan at all. They don't have a plot. They find the plot as they write it. This absolutely blew my mind. And there's this fabulous book, which I love, which is Slightly Mad, by Olga Tokarczuk, a Nobel Prize winner, called Drive Your Plow Over My Bones. Fantastic, fantastic book. And it's a murder mystery story, really. And she said she didn't know who'd done it until 2/3 of the way through, and it wasn't who she thought. Now, the capacity to keep going when you don't know where the book is going is quite something. And it reminded me of what Patrick Kavanagh said about sensitive humility and sensitive courage. The humility to know you don't know, and the courage to start anyway. I thought that was really fundamental. And then I thought about how, okay, in other situations you may sort of know the plot, but it doesn't quite work out the way you thought. Sebastian Barry told me about when he started what became Days Without End, working for 9 months on the opening chapter, every day, writing something, reading it next morning, throwing it out, or maybe writing more. And at the end of 9 months, looking at the whole thing, thinking, this is all shit, throwing it out, starting with a sentence that he realized was the beginning of a completely new style. And of course, the other thing that happens is all this is happening when nobody has any idea. I mean, even if they've got a commission or a contract or a little bit of money, they have no idea if it's going to be any good, if anybody's going to like it, what's going to happen. I think the most gut-wrenching story I heard was from Peter Flannery, who in 1982 wrote a play called Our Friends in the North after watching Henry VI and thinking, what happens if you move that forward to the present? And it took 14 years before they started filming it. And the longer he waited, and the more the BBC shilly-shallied, and the more that people said, no, dump that plot, add this plot, and controllers changed, and heads of drama changed, and all this stuff. As he said, his peers were getting their shows on TV. Bleasdale and people like that, they were doing their best work, and he was, this thing was just hanging. And he said, this nearly broke him. And of course, because they decided that each episode would be a year of a general election, the longer this went on, the more episodes they were. So you have to write characters without knowing where they're going to end up. And there are 160 speaking parts in this series. I mean, that is stamina. It is the most incredible grit. And I'm deeply impressed by that capacity to keep going when there's no guarantee and there's no certainty as to what will happen. And Flannery tells his story about walking the streets of Newcastle when they're 9 months into filming. And Daniel Craig and Mark Strong, who at the time, of course, are not stars, are chatting to each other and saying, I don't know, what do you think? Is this going to be any good? They say, I don't know. Nobody has any idea this is going to be considered to be some of the greatest television ever made in the world, right? This takes incredible stamina. Or you can take somebody like Miles Davis, who decides he wants to record an album with a producer he's never worked with. He wants to do it in a way he's never done before, and neither have any of his band. It's using modes, which is a really old, rather archaic way of thinking about music. And he's doing it with a band most of whose members can't stand each other, right? This is uncertain. Most people would say, would you like this gig? No, thank you. Miles walks in, they start recording. The first track takes 3 takes. I think the very last one takes 1. It takes 2 days to record this album, which came to be known as Kind of Blue. Nobody had the faintest idea that it would come to be known as the greatest jazz recording ever made. And Miles never did it again, because repeating yourself isn't interesting. Why would you want to do that? So artists are also fantastically good at change. So he goes into funk, he goes into electric, he starts painting, right? Schoenberg, who writes this fantastically plangent music, throws it all over for the 12-tone scale. I mean, artists are constantly, this curiosity that begins their career just keeps driving it and driving it and driving it. And at no point in any of this long sort of narrative is there any certainty. I mean, Sebastian Barry said when he sent off Days Without End to his agent, he said to his wife, and she was there at the time, so I believe him, I don't think anybody's going to like this. And that means I have to start writing another book this year, because otherwise we can't pay the bills. It was the first time anybody'd won the Costa Prize twice. But he didn't know that. So I think these are formidable, strong, imaginative, flexible, adaptive, inventive, imaginative people. And that's exactly what we need today. But then I look at what we've done to schools, where participation in art subjects has fallen by 40%. I look at the Department of Students, which reduced the subsidy for creative and performing arts by 49%. I look at national funding for the arts, which has fallen by 50%, and that's before you think about the cuts from local government. I think that we've lost 800 libraries and 467 museums, and I think, what the hell are we doing?
And also, as well, to just add to that, obviously, because I'm a principal and the CEO of a theatre school, but also as well the humanities and arts.
Yeah, exactly.
Since I've been in tenureship, up to 200 courses have gone.
So this is a crisis. And that's despite the fact that the World Economic Forum, who people love or hate, have said most critical skills right now, critical and creative thinking. National Education Foundation, critical and creative thinking. We are heading into uncertainty. It is not going away. And we need these capacities in all of us and our children and their children if we're going to have any future at all.
Very good. I want to come back to what we change. But Andrew, could I bring you in? And you feature in the book, in particular your fantastic project, The Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. Can you say a little bit about that project and why it was you think Margaret was drawn towards it as an exemplar of the creative process in practice?
Let's start, because I'm not sure if everybody will know what Gardens by the Bay is in Singapore. So let's start at the current situation. Gardens by the Bay is a 54-hectare park in Singapore, which has become like a global icon for garden design, landscape design, and as a visitor attraction. It gets 14 million visitors a year, and it is deemed to be, real reference point for. This is how we can design and create amazing, futuristic, beautiful, environmentally sensitive environments. But jumping back to 2006, so this is an interesting long time. I had a small practice in Bath. There were probably about 10 people in Bath, and we were invited to put in an expression of interest to the National Parks Board, who were running this competition. At that stage, the brief was simple. We've got 54 hectares. We want to make it a globally significant botanic garden. And it was as simple as that. There was no sort of reference that we want it to have cloud forests or super trees or gardens that represent the different cultures of Asia. I mean, all of that generated out of conversations between myself and my team and my collaborators, because basically from the beginning, I couldn't do this on my own. I needed people to work with. So architects, engineers, graphic designers, exhibition designers, horticulturists. So suddenly you have this portfolio of ideas coming from many, many people. And fundamentally, I think that's part of the conversation this evening is how do we capitalize on those collaborations? I use the word ecosystem a lot in my work. And it crosses over the creative world, it crosses over the natural world. And in all of that, there is huge uncertainty about what's the next step. What is nature going to do to upset our sort of carefully laid plans? What is the weather going to do? What's the client going to do in terms of what's the economist going to do in terms of, well, we can't afford that bit, we can afford this bit. So within that, over a 2-year period, we developed this plan from a tiny little idea, which was my thought, how do we root this project? And it goes to what Margaret's saying, it's just beginnings of a germ of idea, it's not the definitive solution. But this was about using the orchid as a metaphor in a way. The national flower of Singapore, the most cosmopolitan species in the planet, it has beautiful flowers, which became a sort of a reference to all of the team and the client in terms of the beauty of what we want to achieve. It wasn't necessarily want to create orchid flowers, it's the beauty and the sensuality of those elements. And then the other side of the orchid is this amazing physiology, which has the capacity to survive in extraordinary, difficult locations anywhere on the planet. And so you start to think about this sustainable infrastructure. So suddenly the engineering was all about how do we create this, basically, ridiculous idea at the time, a zero-carbon, air-conditioned glass house in the tropics. So you set challenges. We set challenges to ourselves. And basically from there, we began to resolve different levels of solutions for different parts of the puzzle. And in the book, Margaret describes how this sort of slightly chaotic roller coaster of interfaces with different people at different moments that just build and build and build. So the super trees, for instance, that they went through multiple sort of ideas about how we make these things so that they're elegant and beautiful and imply sort of some biophilic, biomorphic reference, but they're not heavy and ugly. How do they support plants? How do we use lighting to sort of give them qualities and use sound to make them interesting? And suddenly you get input from people like the lighting designers saying, well, we can get the trees to talk to each other in light. Beautiful ideas that just come out of conversation and collaboration that ultimately led to what we see on the ground. And for me, that is my role, I suppose, in all of that is asking questions, trying to curate, not necessarily always successfully. It's always, ideas come out of the blue somewhat, but it's allowing that, energy and ideas to sort of flow in from whatever side.
Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely fascinating. And just completing the line, could you say the art and politics chapter is the one in which Margaret talks about your one-woman show, Nina. Mm-hmm. Could you say a bit about that, but also a bit about, because I know, judging, looking at the book down there and all your post-it notes in it.
This is what she did. This is what it looks like.
There's a book well read. That's how you read a book. What about Margaret's book that resonated for you in the light of that?
Damn you. No. Okay, a couple of little contexts. First of all, I'm neurodivergent as well. I can disclose that one of those parts of me is to be dyslexic. So living in an environment of uncertainty is every day for me. I'm kind of going, ooh, you're all catching up. I think the other thing that resonates with the book is that, and there's a phrase in there for me which says, all art is a response to chaos. The thing that binds us is our humanness, and that can never be replicated, whether it's digital or otherwise, and I think it's been really articulated so well by my good colleague here. This also pissed me off, this book, because I'm an artist as well, and there were parts of it where but I just thought to myself, we could also come across as very naive, that we somehow run into things that it doesn't cost us, and it costs us. It's cost us through history and time, so the loss of our communities. It costs us at every point, and I know that, Margaret, that I'm beginning to know better and better. This isn't over, my friend. I'm understanding more and more that to enter into this landscape, we have a responsibility to be as articulate as possible, not to shy away from the difficult conversations. So I've made a few notes just so I can stay on script. There was so much in here, though, that just So the first thing I thought was to have your voice in our community, I think is a huge, huge asset. I can't thank you enough for this, and I look forward to the other chapters that you'll gather. I wish that our current government, the previous government, would understand the impact of who we are, and the challenge for me is that we're not able to encapsulate the absolute thing, the essence of who we are, and that is always, I was looking at the walls here, what is it that is evoked in you? Why does this even exist as an organization? What is it in the arts? We can't spray it. So if I go, let's have a look. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. Now, whatever happened in the room then, I can't explain that on an application, and I can't put it in a policy, and I can't put it in front of a government. What is it that happened? Now, just to be clear, my third language is also sign language. And I speak as an ally, not as a deaf or hard of hearing person. That music would be translated into sign language. So I just want to stop there. So in terms of what the book activated, this is just part of it. There was phrase after phrase that I just thought, how dare you articulate us? How dare you capture that spirit? How dare you hold the argument? It was also very important and very moving to see Why Not? Theatre there, a fantastic Canadian company that I had the good pleasure and will be working with again this summer, with Ravi and Miranda as well. Fantastic company who actually helped me step into a place of uncertainty, which is where I directed. I'm coming on to Nina in a moment, but I think landscape, ecology is very important. This is the landscape that I move in. They allowed me to do one of the first productions that combined those who speak, deaf and hard of hearing, actors redoing The Tempest in Edmonton, and one of my most uncertain moments was the whole cast standing in swimming clothes and tracksuits with interpreters sitting in the audience while we flooded them with water. They all stood in a line, and I said, okay, we're going to be in water in the production, everybody ready? And it was being translated, and the technicians were pulling their hair out, and everyone, I said, turn the tap on, and everyone went, and then this little drop came, and then it came, and after a while, they were rolling and dancing and contacting each other in that space. It was also really interesting as well to see Michael Spence in there. Michael Spence, a good colleague from UCL as well, sitting in some of the questions that you ask in the book. That also resonated, and I love the way you articulated the absolute, and I use this word fervently, the disrespect of the arts in our lives, from the moment we come out to the moment we will leave this earth. I come back from Sweden. Before then, I was the head of acting at Stockholm's University of the Arts, so I also speak Swedish. It's a complex landscape that I live in. But there is the uncertainty, because they all meet. These are the things that resonated for me. I loved that. I love the fact that you talked about quiet work, the stuff that is unseen, that is done through breath. So Greenham Common, I found very resonant, where we're talking about the women who are making the quilts as well, get quiet, and I think it's now ended that it's something like 50 tons. The blanket is so big, and since Greenham Common started, it went all the way, 50 tons. There's also as well, of course, the comment about the AIDS epidemic as well, and what art and what it did. So there's so much, and then Nina. A last little thing I wanted to say as well, that the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, who has Josette Bushell-Mingo as their principal and CEO, you can imagine what mischief I must get up to. But also as well, we have begun a discussion with the United Nations. It is a unique discussion which is looking at their theatre and movie society, which is using the arts as a catalyst to be able to examine their pillars, which could include everything from war, women, children. They use, at this point, Shakespeare as a way to take some of the most important ideas of our time through the English Language Day. We can talk about English and etc. That's a whole other situation. I will get to Nina in a moment. But I just wanted to bring up the UN. They lean to us in the arts to say that we have an answer somewhere, that we can bring people together through language, through translation. And we've recorded Shakespeare in Farsi, in sign language, American Sign Language, in French, in Swedish, using the words and spirit to bring communities together. And that's it. Nina. Nina was a response because I was scared. Round about 2015, and I was not someone who's socially media savvy, it was drawn to my attention around about Black Lives Matter, and in particular the murder of a person called Sandra Bland, if anyone remembers that. that position there for me was, it was the first time that I followed what was happening in terms of the continual racism and violence that was happening in the States and also happens in our own country at this point and many others. I followed Sandra Bland's story. And the reason that the piece came about was I followed some of the technical, and I know this is being recorded and there may be people who will correct me, but what I followed in Sandra Bland is that she was stopped by a policeman in the United States. She was asked to step out of the car. She was then taken to an American prison and remained there. Was found later dead. Now, what happened after that was, whether you agree with it, believe it or not, that's not the point. I then entered a journey for the first time because when Sandra responded to the policeman, misquote, "Excuse me, officer," it then led to them not being here. What was very important for me was also how the community started to use media to understand what was happening to Sandra. And what happened was there were photographs of her where she had plaits, and they realized that the pictures that were taken, the plaits, you know, the long here, was falling backwards. If it was falling backwards, it meant she was lying down. I could go on and on about it. Out of that came my own fear. For the first time, I saw myself in Sandra, but I didn't know what to do with my art. I felt powerless. I felt that everything I'd done for 40 years as an actress was just, what was the point? And going further and further into Black British, but also Black American history, and of course the diaspora, I became overwhelmed. I was asked, I kept thinking of different vessels and the ways to do it, and I realized that every time I said Aretha Franklin, people went, yeah. If I said Billie Holiday, they went, ooh. If I said, yeah. But when I said Nina Simone, everybody went. And I was curious about that. I then did my own work, as you comment in the book as well, you know, to know that Nina's work is being used for adverts, football promotions, not knowing what this person gave up and what the community's allies as well gave up. I'm done. So, Nina Simone was created. It was my response to a situation. I did not play Nina. I played my response to Nina. There's a very famous passage where Nina talks about if I, in a time of violence, maybe it's time that I took up a gun myself. The quote can be found, and it pushed me to a point to say, I have to do something with this. Not because I was intending to do that, but my own fear and my own lack of courage is what came into the piece. It was a combination of saying that, talking about Nina's revolution, and then actually Googling revolution, and it's a circle. The revolution goes round and round, and we just end up exactly where we were. So the whole piece goes through that, and it asks a very naughty question at the end. So that's what I did, and I sang 15 of Nina's songs, and the show's coming back, and I'm knackered just thinking about it. So that's my response to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the show. It is astonishing, absolutely astonishing, and it just stays with people. I think this is one of the things that art does, is it stays with you, and it changes you. Yeah. And you can't see it, you can't measure what it's done to you, you can't see it in an X-ray, but it is palpably there. And that, of course, is why governments are afraid of it.
There you go. And that's the thing. What we do goes through everything in this room, whether it's historic or otherwise, is a creative impulse. Everything. The arts that we train in, we go into science, into medicine, into biology, we become politicians, etc. We become good human beings, every single thing. And the thing that you bring up in the midst of that, whether it's international or otherwise, is the children. The idea that what they, yeah, I could go on and I won't, but what the children miss from this, you're absolutely right, it is being cut. The ability to understand who you are, to see yourself at the youngest age, it's quite disconcerting. So I think the book is a guide, an island of some kind for a while. And we won't talk about what's happening abroad, right?
No.
Or maybe we will. Listen, I want to go to the audience, because I'm sure they'll have thoughts, questions and reflections on the fantastic stories we've heard already this evening. Someone's just dashing out for the microphone. Hang on a second. They'll be back, so everyone can hear you, not just in the room, but online as well. just coming now. Here it is. Rachel's here. It's behind you. And we'll get the front.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. My name is Bushell-Mingo. I have a background in technology, but I am actually a teacher. And I teach computer science. I believe in the whole creative process. It's not just about logic, it is about that creative side. But I'm also interested in AI. I have concerns about the lack of creative subjects being encouraged and funded in schools. But I also worry that people are using, I want technology to do the boring stuff for us. I want us to do fun stuff or creative stuff. I'd be interested to know what your response is to the use of AI as a creative tool for you as artists, and also what we as individuals can do to encourage more creativity amongst our young people.
Fantastic. So hold that thought.
Okay.
We'll take another Rachel question down here. I'll take 3, and then we'll go back to the panel.
My name's Jenny. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been a teacher. I'm a change catalyst. I'm always watching. As you said earlier, you can never be of the moment unless you're of the moment. You have to keep watching. Whilst you were talking just then, I just thought, I do some school reading, and I'm with neurodivergent kids, and it's coming a lot to me at the moment and stuff. So I thought, why has the universe provided that so many people are neurodiverse now? How do we embrace them, encourage them to lead with their voices? What shifts are needed, where, and when can it start? How should it start? And then I had a second question. How do we pay homage to the old whilst embracing the new?
Very good. 2 mega questions. We'll go one more here, and then we'll go back to the...
Hi, thank you for that so much. It was amazing. I've really enjoyed it. My name's Crystal McGilvery. My question, I guess, is off the back of this question we just heard. So to add to that, with the whole neurodivergence, unrepresented, I guess on the other side of it, one side is how do we create a space that is safe for people who have maybe more to lose by taking a risk. So kind of considering that side of it, and I obviously talk from personal experience, being in spaces, quite senior up in my role, but actually when I speak up, there's a big risk. And I work with people in business as well. So yeah, kind of adding on to the back of that question.
Fantastic. So 4, 5 actually, modestly sized questions. The future of AI, the future of education, neurodiversity in its many and various forms, the role of the old and the new, and the role of taking risks safely. Let's just feel free to answer all of those if you like.
Okay, fine. Gee, thanks. I can hardly
Your
wait.
favourite subject.
Yeah, it's quite a lot to get one's head around. I mean, I would say there's an enormous amount to be said about AI, and an enormous amount that has already been said about AI. When I talk to creative artists, some of them are dead set against it over their dead body, and at the other end of the spectrum, I talk to musicians who say it's fantastic, I can do a sketch with AI and get rid of my really, really crappy ideas early and then really go back to focus on the ones that the sketch shows me will lead me somewhere. As somebody who's run tech companies, I think that, first of all, the prime product that has always come out of Silicon Valley has been propaganda first and product second. So I'm extremely disenchanted by, horrified by, the propaganda machine that has sold something before we know what it is to people who definitely don't understand it. I'm dismayed by the number of executives I talk to who are far more excited by the prospect of how many people they can get rid of in order to increase their profits exponentially. And I'm dismayed by the prospect of an even more unequal society than we have today, which is grossly more unequal than it was 20 years ago. So is that AI's fault? No, it's about how the goodies are going to be distributed. It's not the fault of the technology per se. So if I had my druthers, I would wish that we were more thoughtful about this, that the conversation was being had between a much, much more diverse bunch of people at a more thoughtful pace, and that we would understand what we do understand about other kinds of technologies, like cars and planes and trains and medicines, which is that every new technology has unexpected side effects. And we should think about AI in exactly the same way that we do about medicine, which is we have to figure out what those are first before it's released upon an unsuspecting public. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why we're willing to do to people's minds what we're not willing to do to their bodies.
Very nicely put.
What was the second one? The second one was about neurodiversity. Well, I mean, nature depends on, defines, thrives, and survives because of diversity. You know, systems that are not diverse aren't sustainable and they aren't healthy. Andrew knows that better than anybody. Mm-hmm. So I honestly don't know if there is more neurodiversity now or if we're simply more aware of it. And I think becoming more aware of it is only to be celebrated. I think it's fantastic as somebody who has a dyslexic daughter that now they've got over thinking she's stupid. But she's got past the teacher who said, you know, we had a dyslexic student once and she even got into university, which was about the day before I took her out of that school. Mm-hmm. You know, so there's generations, centuries of harm here. I don't think we've solved the case yet, but I'm very glad we're at least on it. And, you know, and I think all people are creative. I mean, what the research shows is, this is kind of tragic, you know, at the age of 5, 98% of people are measured as creative, and by the time they're 25, only 5% are. So my question is, what are we doing to them, and could we please stop? Maybe somebody else would like to take
Andrew.
one of those other questions.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, isn't it? I came primed with lots of sort of thoughts about AI because it affects my industry, the built environment. There's lots of energy going into it. But I suppose the starting point is AI is about intelligence and data processing. It's very different to creativity, which creativity is about the drive to imagine something that doesn't exist yet. And AI is basically processing data that exists and coming up with an answer that is ultimately homogenizing responses to questions.
Yeah.
So the human place in that is to be the discordant member of that. And actually that's our role, I think, going future. We need to be the awkward grit in the oyster, the sort of the people who ask awkward questions and come up with ideas that sort of basically just challenge the world of AI. AI is clearly going to have a role in how we go forward. It can help in all sorts of ways. If we want to create a sort of a climate-sensitive approach to how we live our lives and all the rest of it, that's a great tool to help us get along that road. But it's not going to create the most beautiful futuristic buildings that actually respond to that. That's got to come from us asking the right questions, delivering the right ideas. And I think the other thing that struck me about AI is the point that you made, Margaret, which is it's immediate data answer. We don't do that. We stop and think. We sort of pause. We go for a walk.
We may wait 20 years before it turns into something.
Charles Darwin, in a similar way, he invented his sort of stand walk as a thinking path. You know, it's just... So we have to embrace all of those things that we do as humans in terms of the creative engagement. Slow. And actually talk, to your point, we need to sort of celebrate that and talk about it. This is how we work. This is how we...
Absolutely.
How we are artists, creatives, designers.
Exactly. I'm going to try and answer all three, typical, right? So in terms of the first question, I'll start the other way. As a neurodivergent person, I'll come back to your question, but as someone who has had the opportunity to work with my deaf and hard of hearing community, for persons who are disabled, etc., AI and technologies, because they are two different things, have changed the playing field. And this is something that I think we have to be vigilant as humans as to what that question is. Whether it's the translation, captioning, whether it is sign avatars, whether it's Gallaudet University in the United States that has some of the most important technologies available. I think in the creative space, certainly from a higher education institution, we are looking into it as it's happening. But at the center of it is always the human and the student. That's the most important thing, and I totally agree with you. I don't think that's going to change. In terms of the creativity, it's how do you bring it to meet it, and what level of AI are we bringing in? And that's why I, for myself, who's not a tech person in that way, separate the two. Because again, if I was to speak for the systems that exist just to be able to be translated into other countries, this is a huge possibility. Ironically, of course, coming back to the UN, human translators, always, that also make mistakes. So I think in my answer to you would be is that trying to foster the rooms where both can be met and where both can be examined, and I think that's where the bigger conversation. Secondly, at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, we received just under 6 million to build something called a PTEC, which is a PTEC building is basically a building that we've been funded by Research Excellence Framework. It's a building that's going to start as we speak, and it will actually look at the newest technologies, including AI, motion capture, etc., in a building. It's a central teaching capacity for us. It's very important. That building will actively start to bring artists, technicians, scientists together to start, because I think that's what's missed. I think we haven't created enough spaces to go, let's bring you and I together, let's get you in the room, let's see what can actually happen. And I think we could have charted it slightly better. So that would be my very simplistic answer at this point, but much more. I think when it comes to neurodiversity, we were always here.
Yes. Yes.
There's nothing has changed, and I've got to be very calm and not get too angry. We were always here. The child who was told that they couldn't tell the time at 11 was always here. What I think is very interesting is how we, within our higher education, within learning and with creativity, and it's interesting to know on percentage how many neurodivergent people, every one of us is different, are in the arts. All of us, all of the time. So that's one thing I would say. That would be my answer. We've always been here. We live in uncertainty. And ironically, next Friday, we have a symposium at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, bringing artists together to start to answer that question and to take our space and our position and to articulate what Margaret is doing now in the most and broadest range. So that would be it is not a fad, it is not a superpower. No. I'm a human being, and I think differently. The last question then was, how do we pay homage to the old and the new? I think that's a huge question. It's about recognizing your history and telling that history. I sit in a higher education institution. Michael Spence will speak about that even more. How do we keep that? That's what my piece, Nina, was about. How do I go back and look at all of that lynching and hanging and beatings, excuse me, everyone, and murders? How do I do that and bring it here so I can sit here with you in a room and know that that is with me and still move forward? I think in answer to your question about those spaces, there is no safe space. There are spaces that are brave enough to take it when it happens, that have asked those questions, and that is a really provocative thing to say, because as soon as we become complacent with safety, every policy, every rule, etc., and take out the human, my students out of that, with singular and individual experiences, we're done. I say we are aiming to be one of the most inclusive, and we are brave enough, even your principal, when I have made a mistake, to step up and own that. In terms of the rooms that you're speaking about, yes. That's all I'm saying. Yes. But the risk is worth it because of the history that we know. I am here because of many people. That would be a really slightly light touch to what I know is a much deeper legacy question.
Fantastic. Let's take, time is getting short. We'll take another round of questions. Bear in mind, panel.
One-word answers.
Well, good luck with that one. There's a question about education, which we should return to. I'm going to ask each of you for your suggestion for how we rethink and reformulate education to meet the ages we've been discussing this evening. But let's take a couple more questions to add to that on this side, maybe here and here.
Thank you, and I loved everything I've heard. I'm Callum, I'm an actuary, so a mathematician, say, and I'm inspired by what you're saying, Andrew, the need to stimulate our imagination for the future with what AI is bringing, and I'm just wondering whether the sciences, as a maths person, need to learn more from the arts. Josette, you mentioned the disrespect for the arts in our lives. I just wonder whether, AI future, we've got a lot to learn, and maybe we need to mingle more.
Could you just pass the mic across? Thank you.
That's
away.
Absolutely.
It's the Henry play.
Hello. It's a question on education. I was just thinking, all the education I've ever done has been about precision and perfection and grades, and just how can we teach how to grasp and tolerate uncertainty in a way that is realistic.
Fantastic. I'm going to take one more question. Maybe over here, just to make Rachel run across the room. And I'll go back to...
Hi. I think mine might be a bit more of a reflection, having read the book, but I think there's something really poignant to say about the link between art and conversation. We've never been more polarised and divided, and actually every conversation, if we choose to see it as such, is a step into the unknown. It's a dance with uncertainty, because we cannot possibly know, A, what the other person is going to respond, but B, more importantly, how they have heard your message. And I find it really curious that in industry we use really forward-thinking activities for leadership development, like role play. We do, in a very stunted and stilted way, try and bring art into what is a very uniform, to your point, homogenous way of being. But I think there's something really... At some point in the book, you'd mentioned, to Andy's point about just wandering around and listening, leaning into opinions that you won't have expected, that you might feel really deeply discomforted by, and having the grace to just hold those opinions regardless of how much they jar with your own worldview. And I don't personally believe that very much is going to change until we re-educate ourselves to hold the uncertainty of difficult conversations.
Very good. So we go down the line again in reverse order. So you may have thought a one-woman show was difficult, Josette.
This question.
You give a one-word answer now. To the future of education.
Nina! The future of education, I think, is STEAM, not STEM. In the book, Margaret actually quotes a pool of scientists using King Henry plays as a way to examine leadership, vulnerability. They call it a little bit of Harry and the Knight, and was actually used in my own leadership training, ironically. There's a point where Harry, the new king, doesn't know what he's going to do in the war, is sitting battlement, the troops are absolutely at the end, and he actually chooses to go out to the people. He chooses to go out and listen to how they feel before that war happens. And in fact, this sign, it comes from that, which is, of course, was the arrow to pull. And if they cut your fingers off, it meant you could never fire the arrow. That's why people do this. Obviously, that's on camera now, and I should be fired. But that's where this comes from. It's because it actually says, look, I'm still alive. So I believe, in answer to your question, maths is science. It is the creation of ideas and numbers. It is magical in itself. It is a constellation of stars. The thing is that it has driven us apart. Every time I've spoken to scientists, whether it's through our P-Tech building or to come, they've always gone, can't wait. Nervous, yes. Shy, yes. I'm not a Shakespeare actor, yes. But actually the meeting, it's to bring in your point, this is the rarest of gifts. Who knows where we will be tomorrow? But in answer to your question, I fundamentally believe if we got into a room together, what fun we would have. What understanding would be gained. As a dyslexic who cannot count, I can still find magic in what you are doing. And this is the constellation. I always talk about that at my school. My students are surrounded by the constellation, the numbers of creativity, moving through. That's one. STEAM, not STEM. The invite is there. I dare you, Royal Shakespeare Company, get your tracksuit on. We'll be there. I think the other thing, I missed the other gentleman, which was about the unrealistic practices. I'm sorry, I missed that last.
I think you covered it. It was education, actually. So I think
Yeah, ideally our space. The way we have responded and the way I hope to be able to lead and leave a legacy is that the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama will be one of the most dynamic arts and research training institutions and cultural centre. The idea is that Central starts to be a magnet, whether you agree with us or not, to bring theatres together, artists together. So we've got Maggie Regine Pocock, the Science Stars at Night, for example. We've got Ben Ockery as an associate. We've got Anne Mensah from Netflix, pulling all of these people to feed into our institution and protect us when things happen. We have associate companies using that so that it becomes realistic. And ideally, I hope that our spaces, and they're never going to be perfect, back to your questions, is that they are spaces where we are brave enough to own up when we didn't get it right, and that we are able to practice ready for out there, because it's different to what is in here. That's what I hope, and then actively listening.
Wonderful. Andrew?
Very quickly, my good friend, Dr. Penny Hay, is Professor of Imagination at Bath Spa University, would be the person to answer this question about education. She has been working, her whole career has been about how do we free education for the creativity within children, and using the sense of freedom, no boundaries, play, just allowing people allowing kids just to sort of have great fun. And 12 years ago we set up the Forest of Imagination in Bath, which is a pop-up festival where each year we create a sub-world, an uncertain world.
Very
uncertain. Is it going to happen? Is it?
What is it? What is it?
What is it? How do you do it?
What's it going to be this year?
Yeah, I mean, 10,000 people every year come and just engage with this in a free way. And most of those are school kids and families. And this is an opportunity for them to engage with artists and interact with art installations in a way that they just simply don't get at school.
No, absolutely.
So, we think there should be a Forest of Imagination in every school, every part of the world.
And also that question of how, why,
yes, absolutely.
when, if
and
this.
Fundamentally, I mean, one of the key participants is a professor of mathematics at Bristol University who's just happy to engage with that dialogue. And the more we can do that, better.
Yeah,
Here to all of that. Margaret, bring us home.
Well, I think, one of the people I start my book with is Carlo Rovelli, in talking about how scientists are like artists in the sense that they're both drawn towards what's uncertain and unknown. And they both understand that what's to be discovered is between things. It's not a thing. It's the relationship between things where new discoveries are to be made. So I think we need to get over this idea that they're completely different species. I think they're different forms of curiosity and different forms of inquiry. I think when it comes to education, I mean, I know, and I've been involved somewhat with Penny's Forest of Imagination, which I think is completely brilliant. The first time I got involved, I hung around for ages. I had no idea why I was there or what I was doing. And I just hung around listening until I suddenly thought, oh, I can help with that. Which is a kind of classic creative exchange. And I can remember last year going and taking my husband, whose brother had very recently died, very suddenly and very ambiguously. And it absolutely did him the greatest good I've ever seen happen to a person in a matter of hours in terms of healing. It was extraordinary. We have research that shows, to the degree that you integrate the arts more into schools, everybody does better at every subject, right? This is a kind of magic thing that lifts all boats. We have very different kinds of education systems from Singapore to Finland that don't do exams until kids are about 16. They're some of the highest achieving education systems in the world. They score very highly on creativity, a PISA test which neither the US nor the UK government was prepared even to enter into. So I think we have to start understanding and spreading the argument that the arts are not, as Suito Kinch expressed this to me, he said, people in England think that it's like dessert. It's kind of lovely, but it's not really very good for you, and you're better off without it. And I think it's a pretty wonderful expression of how many people regard the arts. It's this sort of superfluous and indulgent, and it's not for real people, and it's not for grown-ups. I think we have to get way past that extremely old-fashioned and uninformed attitude and realize it's a kind of magic potion, right? It helps young people learn how to concentrate, learn how to listen, learn how to communicate. It helps older students really focus and interact with other people. It helps the elderly stave off depression and dementia. I mean, this stuff is just good for everybody, right? That's it. It makes everybody better. It makes them much better at communicating with people not like them. And I think this is really the heart of the problem, it's pleasurable. I mean, God forbid, in a puritanical culture, there's something that gives people joy and it's good for them. Wouldn't it be great if we could get our heads around that?
And what a wonderful way to end. Listen, the time is up, more than up. But let me thank everyone online for joining us. And if you want to buy Margaret's book, there's a link online for you to do that. For those in the room, you don't have to wait as long as that. You can buy Margaret's book outside.
Right. Please do.
And she might even sign it for you.
Even writers need to eat.
And having spent money on Margaret's book, you then go downstairs and spend a bit more money on alcohol in our bar, or indeed non-alcohol, all at very reasonable prices. Before I thank our panelists, there's one more person I wanted to thank, who's not on the stage, but will be now. So Mari, come up here, please. So Mari, as some of you will know, has been our, come on up, our event curator for the last decade, Mari, and is regrettably now leaving us. So this is Mari's officially last event as curator. She has worked her own magic over many years in bringing together people on this stage, including me. Mari's the first person I ever met at the RSA when I was speaking here, well ahead of arriving here. And I did want to put on record what an amazing role she has played over that period in making the RSA the special place it is. And please join me in thanking her. And now you're in the spirit of clapping. Just one more time, this time with feeling, for our incredible panel this evening, Josette, Andrew, and Margaret.